Okay, well, here we are, Monday morning. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Marcy Turman. I'm the COO at a company called DATAFORT, and I'm joined by my colleagues Austin Cooper, who is a key member of the development team at DATAFORT, and Gavin Smith, who drives AI development at DATAFORT. And Gavin has been active in the AI field since I met him 15 years ago. I really want to thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to make this presentation about how AI can increase your productivity. I think it's really important to understand this technology because in the near future, it's going to become a significant factor in all aspects of business. And while large companies recognize the transformative nature of this technology and are devoting significant resources into determining where it can be used to leverage an advantage, I think sometimes smaller companies are slower to adopt this technology, and that's an opportunity. By virtue of you being here, you're ahead of the curve, and it's the first step in contemplating how you can use AI to create a competitive advantage in how you do business. Now, one thing I've noticed about AI is that there's very few people who don't have a strong opinion about the subject and what it means for the future of business. There'll be some individuals at a company that use it because they found a feature that's quite cool, and they use it for like editing documents or to get help with web technology or spreadsheets. On the other hand, if people don't understand AI and are put off by it, maybe they've tried it without understanding how to structure a prompt and therefore have gotten a poor result. Or they perceive it only as a threat and not as a way to gain an advantage. But I've not run into a single company that can't use AI in some way to create something beneficial. Now, for those of you that haven't had the time to try Bard or ChatGPT, I'm going to point out some very simple ways that you can use it from a browser window to be more productive. And then I'll pass the mic on to Austin, who talk about a specific application and how to use AI to write business communications. Now, this can be quite nuanced and sophisticated if you understand how to use it. And that is one of the really exciting things about the technology. And then Austin will hand the microphone over to Gavin, who'll talk about the improvements that were made to ChatGPT in Q4 of 2023 and how these have created a real step change in the practical applications that are possible with this technology. He'll introduce a way that you look critically at a business as a whole to analyze where AI can be used systematically and immediately to make your company more productive. And he'll touch on security of proprietary business data and why it's critically important to understand how to use AI safely in a way that protects your company data. And then we'll finish up with Q&A in case you have some questions. And finally, I have a free software application that I'll share with everybody on the call. This can be used to enhance your presence on LinkedIn and Twitter without taking time out of your business day. Now, let's start with some examples of how AI can help with mundane tasks. I've used ChatGPT and I've opted for a paid account. Using the paid service costs £20 a month, not very expensive. And the free version is not connected to the internet, so there's a whole range of functionality that isn't available to you if you remain with the free service. The free service ended its training. Currently, the model is trained up to April 2023, and the company has announced that they will make product releases much slower to the free version. So if you're using ChatGPT in business, it's either a good idea to get a paid version through your company or to opt for paying for it yourself. One of the primary ways that ChatGPT has made me much more productive is through research. ChatGPT really changes how you do research. Instead of trying to figure out where you can find information you're looking for, all you do is put in plain English into the search bar what you were looking for, and the technology does the deep dive for you, and it will pull in the information without you having to search for it. For instance, I'm going to share with you now, I asked ChatGPT for some information about local mortgage rates. So let me share my screen with you. For people who haven't used ChatGPT before, this is what the browser window looks like. And you simply write into the chat box, what's the best interest rate on home mortgages in Surrey? And then the model will go out onto the internet through its native Bing interface, and it will pull in quite detailed information. Anything that is noted in blue is actually a live link, and if you click on it, it will open a separate browser tab and show you where that information can be found. Now, another really useful application for people who, like me, who are not particularly technical is technical functions that the software can help with. For instance, I don't know how to write a SQL query, and normally I have to wait for the database admin to write a query for me. But as long as I know the table where the data I'm looking for is stored, ChatGPT can write the SQL query for me to pull in the data I need to do my work. The same holds true for writing Excel formulas or adjusting HTML on a website. I can wait for the web developer to help me to do some work, but in this situation, what I wanted to do was create a numbered list on my website, but I didn't know how to write the HTML markup language for that. You put the information in that you want in plain English, and ChatGPT not only does the markup code for you, there's a copy button here, so you can copy and paste it right into your website. The final example that I wanted to talk about, and this is also a huge time saver for me, is things like administrative functions. For instance, contract reviews, I can be made much more efficient. Now, I'm in no way suggesting that generative AI is a replacement for a solicitor. That's not what I'm talking about. But for me, as a consumer of legal services, the way I keep costs manageable is I never hand a contract to my solicitor before reviewing it myself to make sure I understand the salient points and I've identified the areas where I have questions. Instead of plowing through a contract myself, I now create a prompt that asks the AI to identify areas where one party is favored over the other. Are there any clauses that are obviously missing from the contract? Even simple things like misnumbered clauses or incorrect capitalization can be identified by the AI, and that limits the time I'm spending with my solicitor on editing a document. Depending on how you work ChatGPT can cut hours out of editing. My first drafts when I'm working on business documents are quite rich factually, but the structure is totally lacking. ChatGPT is very good at ordering information and cleaning up prose so it's concise and to the point. So training materials, fact sheets, product releases, that kind of information. If you provide context, the software will compose text suitable for that medium. Writing a website is very different to writing a press release or customer communication. So the results can be quite nuanced. So I've put together these examples to stimulate your imagination about using AI as a business tool. But as you start to use the software, you'll create your own ways of working with it to enhance your productivity. And now I'm going to turn the microphone over to Austin Cooper, who will look in depth at one ChatGPT function, content creation, and how to achieve an excellent result instead of a mediocre one. Austin.
Hi guys, thank you. So first, thanks Marcy. I'm Austin, I work for the development team here at DATAFORT. Marcy, I don't know if you saw Dan's comment. I just wanted to mention, he was wondering if he could either be on available to talk really. So I don't know if he'd be added as one of the panelists, but I know that I don't have access at the moment. But let me start, guys, by saying I'm a bit of a techie, so I apologise. I'll be demonstrating until Marcy's already shown you pretty much some of what ChatGPT 4 Plus, the paid for service, can give you. I'm going to kind of take you back to ChatGPT 3.5 and give you a feel for what the free service can do to generate content, how that content can help you potentially as an individual, how that can influence certain parts of your business little by little, but obviously giving you an idea on what we can do with that content, how we can take that a little bit further to help your business by integrating pretty much with the ChatGPT API and making it a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more efficient and scalable for a business to actually take use and maybe even use ChatGPT on an everyday scale. So first, let me share my screen. So apologies, it's going to take me a few seconds because I haven't got this ready.
Okay. You do have control, Austin.
Thank you. There we go. Okay, so I've got currently at the moment, I've got ChatGPT 3.5 on my screen. If you can see it, that should be all right. Can you see it okay?
Yes, we can see that. And by the way, this is the free version that Austin is using today.
Yes. So what Marcy's kind of giving you a feel for is a little bit more around the new version, which has the embedded links, the search engine capabilities around Bing, obviously giving you a little bit more flexibility around bringing in information. Now, first off, Marcy's used ChatGPT is obviously an artificial general intelligence. It allows you the opportunity to communicate in a very kind of natural way. So it's got a natural processing language, which means you can talk to it as a friend. You can communicate without knowing really much about coding or querying. So relatively along the same lines of Marcy, you can create very quick, easy content from writing an email to generate, say, an invite letter, giving you a very generic response, kind of templating the style of what you would expect on this email or document. And that then would obviously allow you to tweak it, add to it and comment, and then utilize that document on a very quick, easy basis. Now, taking that a step further to make a more advanced content, and obviously maybe you want to talk about something that's every day in the news at the moment, say producing, let's have a think, climate change. So climate change is pretty much in the news every day. So you could look at obviously asking ChatGPT to create a very generic document, very much around climate change. Maybe you want to kind of enrich it a little bit by saying, I'd like it to be about 2,500 words, maybe styling it towards a particular audience, like a youthful audience. And ChatGPT will utilize a huge array of kind of resources, kind of looking at the overall topic and bringing in this kind of generic article. A generic content for yourself might not be very relevant. It may lose a little bit of its kind of punch if it doesn't have the exact up-to-date style or exact up-to-date details that are kind of happening every day in the news. But it does produce a very nice kind of bit of content that you can utilize within your business. And obviously you can maybe tweak it a little bit, add to it, and obviously spend a bit of time updating it. Now that said, obviously this generic document isn't as advanced as we'd like it. So you may want to put a bit more information. So to add more information to ChatGPT, you kind of keep adding to the conversation you're having with it. And in doing so, you have to kind of step outside of ChatGPT a little bit. So those steps might be investigating news sites, maybe utilizing particular documents that have come out online, copying and pasting these documents into that ChatGPT search and that response, and therefore obviously enriching it to a point where you've got maybe a very bespoke, almost unique document, very much around the ideals that you would like to put within, say, an article on your website or to publish on a social media channel. So that said, obviously ChatGPT can do a vast array of kind of almost additions to this individual conversation. Now, I've done a kind of few, I suppose, pre-made versions of that. So what I did was obviously I went through and added exactly the same, added the documents that I found online. I asked it to generate, based on 2 different documents, a kind of individual styled article that may be bespoke to the type of way I would like. So I tweaked it, asking it to look at particular focus points, maybe utilizing a particular audience, like a youthful audience. And obviously it generated this rather unique, bespoke document, very much for yourself. And in doing so, I then went through a few regenerations. So ChatGPT will allow you to kind of regenerate every single article again and again, depending upon what you think it's working, good or bad. So you may want it more relevant to, I suppose, a particular country, United Kingdom. And then obviously you submit your feedback, it will produce very quickly a kind of variation in the existing article. So you would then choose between an original article, what you thought was right, and potentially a new article, and you can compare the two and then select which one you found. Now you'll go through several versions of this regeneration to get the right article, the right feel, the right style. And obviously that is very much a step-by-step approach on how you can produce this kind of rich content. Now, what does content give you? So content in theory will give you the opportunity to increase on a business scale, maybe your SEO rankings, adding very relevant, very unique articles on day-by-day basis, news, posts, blogs, social media, to your website, to your social media. It'll obviously drive up this SEO ranking, which obviously drives your business traffic through your websites and obviously increases your business overall. So that said, what you would do there was probably spend around about an hour or 2 generating this kind of content that I think could be done very quickly, utilizing kind of a more bespoke API-driven software. And one of the things we've done at DATAFORT, just to kind of look at what a solution could be at the moment, is we've launched something called News Guru AI. So this News Guru AI allows you to kind of create content using the ChatGPT API, generated from thousands and thousands of resources, so news feeds, RSS feeds, and that in itself can give the user a very quick step. Instead of doing 10 steps, finding the news, finding the kind of styles they want, they can tweak using a kind of very bespoke software this kind of response that you've got from utilizing ChatGPT 3. So what you would then do is obviously create these kind of campaigns relative, depending upon your business, be it SEO, AI, IT security, for instance. And that would then allow you to kind of tweak the style of those articles very quickly by setting this up in maybe 1 step. So choosing the kind of audience you want to hit, the country, maybe the style, be it humorous, professional style of writing, and then it would go off, generate all of these articles based on the existing news, and you would get this very quick, easy understanding of what you could publish to your website, your WordPress site, or to your social media networks. Now, that said, obviously these articles themselves can go through generations, but what you can do with the API is actually generate and scale what you've done with the individual ChatGPT interface very quickly and make this more business efficient. So this article obviously has been produced, is very unique, it's exactly bespoke to your business needs, and obviously comes with its own generated artwork and language based on your requirements. So that's one of the solutions, just one of the solutions you can do with, say, tweaking the ChatGPT API using bespoke software, and that's one of the things I can show you today. Anyway, thanks. That's over to you, Gavin.
Thanks, Austin.
Can I just ask one question on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the biggest fears I have with the ChatGPT thing is it's great at idea generation, it's great at generating text, but I've got an audience who, if I get a fact wrong, would love to take me to task on that, if you see what I mean, step by step. So if you're using chatbot GPT in that sense, is it on you to check every fact in there is correct? Because I mean, you always get the horror stories versus the positives, if you see what I mean. But do you have to do that every single time, or how does it work? Kind of just the pure fact checking side of it.
So I actually cover I think that what you're referring to is hallucinations. There's a lot of talk about how it creates false data. I'm going to cover how to mitigate that and make sure that what you produce is less prone to that in the presentation that I'm going to give moving forward. After I've done that, then it may be worthwhile looping round. In direct answer to your question, I would talk about content in two ways. If you're talking about a blog post or a general information post about what's going on in the world, I would say that following the approach that which I'm going to cover later will mitigate that risk, and what you're producing will be accurate. There's a case in the States actually at the moment where a lawyer used case precedents in a court case which were generated by ChatGPT, and one of them was made up. It was wrong. And clearly, if you're using for ChatGPT for research purposes of that type, you should always check it. It's so a lot of it is scale is what you're going to use the data for. But I'm going to go through techniques, as I said in the presentation in a moment, that will mitigate pretty much all of the hallucination issue that we're talking about.
Thank you.
Okay, let me share my screen. That's the Hi, so I'm Gavin Smith. I'm one of the consultants at DATAFORT. Also, as Marcy said, been involved in AI for a number of years. Marcy and Austin have been through some ways that AI can be used either by using ChatGPT directly or on a packaged GUI with an application that wraps around various AI models and puts them into a single application. Now, I want to delve down into a bit more detail into two things. One, how you can use ChatGPT effectively to meet your needs while still keeping your information secure, because that's a big issue that needs to be considered. I also want to touch on the new release of ChatGPT and what enhancements they've made, which makes the whole use of that product more usable. So So the first myth I wanted to dispel is the idea that there are some secret prompts that deliver superior results when using ChatGPT. There's really no such thing. While someone else's prompts may be good for them and provide you with a starting point, to get the absolute best from the tool, you should focus on understanding how to construct prompts that clearly convey exactly what you want ChatGPT to do. So ChatGPT is a really powerful tool, but it isn't a mind reader. You need to convey very clearly the result you expect and provide the necessary background. The way I think about it is, if I'm training a new junior member of staff, I've given them a job. I need to be very clear the steps they're going to go through and the outcome that I'm expecting to achieve. You need to do the same with ChatGPT. Now, this can be quite challenging at first, but a tip to make this a bit easier is to think of your task request as a number of steps. I mean, Austin alluded to this. A request to ChatGPT doesn't need to be a single sentence or phrase. A lot of people, when they start using it, think they've got to cram everything into a single sentence or a single phrase to get an answer. That's actually not what you need to do. It's often easier to build up the request and hone in on the perfect solution. And what you're doing is using ChatGPT's context window. Now, what do we mean by the phrase context window? Well, it's when you create a ChatGPT session, you're creating a session, you're creating a session that retains the context of what you're talking about. Now, some of you will already experience this by asking ChatGPT to improve upon an answer. As you type questions and provide information and get responses from ChatGPT, it's building a data pool of information about your query. As you question further or request refinements, then it will use the information it already has and build upon that data pool, improving on the responses. Now, before the last release, this context window could hold about a page of text, so it was relatively limited. So when you were describing complex or large requirements or generating a large document, you would need to frequently get ChatGPT to summarize what it knew about the subject. And that would bring the information back to the fore, and you could see what was being considered when it gave the answers to your question. From the latest release, it's now extended to between 50 and 100 pages, more than enough for most requirements. Anything more complex than the 100 pages of text really needs to be more than a simple GUI usage. It needs to consider a full-blown system. There's also security implications, which I'll address a little later. But as you can imagine, with that much data, over time, you can build up a lot of context and a lot of depth to what you're providing ChatGPT to help you hone the answers that you're looking for. So what I've got on the screen is just a simple example, but let's say you want to generate collateral for your product launch. This copy may consist of a press release, a web page, an email campaign with 5 emails that builds up to that launch. Rather than think of these as individual requests or prompts, think of it as an overall task with many outputs. As you enter details about the product and the launch, ChatGPT will build up a knowledge base to draw upon. Rather than a one-off process, this can then be a stream that you keep going back to over time. By giving ChatGPT a full picture of the subject and building this knowledge up, you'll generate an incredibly powerful assistant that you can go to whenever you need to provide a new quote about a product or service, or link it with a current news event. Now, when I'm using it, I think Marcy showed, on the left of the screen, you've got a list of streams. I keep a number of streams going, each for a specific subject, each for a specific task. And when I'm adding to that task, I'll go back to the stream, because what it does is, I've got all the context that it's already got, but I'm using that stream, I'm adding to that context. So it has all of the history, all of that knowledge to build on. So it's an incredibly powerful tool and gives your prompts much more meaning and much more depth. Now, what I've got on the slide, as I said, very simple example that uses this approach to start building up context. I'm creating a new doorbell product called Buzz, and I want to release it to the market. So I gave it 5 key points on the service. Very quickly, ChatGPT builds an understanding of what the product is. With just 5 facts, it was able to provide sufficient context to generate 5 tweets. It would also produce a passable Facebook post. I could then add to that with the founder's quote, some new early customers, and you could do a press release from it, and you can build on that information. Again, building the context and building the information that ChatGPT can use to produce the content. That becomes really valuable when you've got a lot of information and you start weaving it into the news stories of the day. Now, again, Austin touched on this. What I would suggest as an experiment, try building a knowledge base of one of the services you offer and add enough information that ChatGPT provides when you ask for a summary, it provides a good response of the service. Then find a news article in your related business area and ask ChatGPT to summarize the article and weave in benefits your company or your product could bring to solve that particular issue. I think you'll be amazed at the subtlety that it uses to find key features in your service that would help your clients with the subject of the article. And it makes it goes back to personalizing the information specifically for your use and your business. See, I can do AI technology, but PowerPoint thwarts me every time. So before I'm moving on to the new features introduced, I want to briefly discuss a question that I'm asked at almost every presentation and was raised earlier, and that's, what are hallucinations and how do I prevent them? Now, for those who haven't heard the term, there's this concept termed AI hallucinations. It's where ChatGPT has been known to make up information and provide inaccurate results. As I mentioned, there's actually a case in the US at the moment where a lawyer used case precedents which were inaccurately generated by ChatGPT. Now, the technical detail of why it happens gets quite in depth pretty quickly. So I'm not going to go into technical detail, though if anyone's interested, I can take it offline and go through the technology itself, why it's happening. But there are tricks you can use to stop ChatGPT going off on a tangent and producing inaccurate information. And the core reason it happens is because somebody has asked ChatGPT to produce too much information from too little source information. So the way I think of the information flow as a funnel. If you need a small amount of information, then you don't need much source. So asking ChatGPT who the Prime Minister of the UK was in 1963 is going to be fine. The relationship between source data and response is a reasonable balance. If, on the other hand, you ask ChatGPT to produce a detailed précis on the works of Shakespeare with no context, then at best, you're going to get a very general response, very vanilla, with very little insight or originality. At worst, it will create false facts to fill the space. Now, the model has improved over the past year, but it can still be a concern when generating content. So for the best results, turn the funnel around. Provide a lot of background context and information from documents and sources, and ask the model to produce an article or information that draws on that and summarizes the information available. Doesn't need to be information found by you or located by you. As Marcy mentioned, it's linked into the Bing browser, so you can give it sources of information to draw on. So you might find a publicly available list using the Shakespeare analogy of Shakespeare's works. Pull that in, and then give me an update of the 10 most popular plays written by Shakespeare. Give me a précis of the story of the top 2, and it will do a much better job because it's got that breadth of information backing it up. And that's also why earlier I was talking about keeping the streams running. It builds up context and it builds up information for ChatGPT to draw on the particular subject that you're using. And by doing that, you'll reduce the scope for ChatGPT to just make up its own inaccurate information, because it's got enough content and enough context to draw on that it doesn't need to go to its own token linking, which is what's happening when it's hallucinating.
Before you move on, can I ask a question about this?
Sure. Yeah.
So using the example of Shakespeare, because it's really simple, you were saying within a context window, you'd start by saying, list the plays of Shakespeare. Is that correct?
You might do. I mean, that actually, again, touched on something I was going to mention later. We have a client that wanted ebooks. Now, they use it for marketing purposes. Now, if you imagine if you've noticed, there's a lot of ebooks all of a sudden popped up, generated by AI, and the thing that's common across all of them, most of them are 10 to 15 pages long, have no real content, and are very light in value. What the customer wanted was something that had real depth in the subject they were generating. So the way we, and this is an example of why you don't have to do the work yourself. The way we handled that, first generate an outline. And ChatGPT will generate a very good outline of what you're trying to produce. So it could be Shakespeare, it could be any subject. Then you drill down into each one, and you drill down and get information from about that particular section, and you pull context together. Then you write that section, move on to the next, and you're keeping all that context behind. So it takes longer. If you're doing it manually, it definitely takes longer. But even you systemize it, it takes time because it's got to draw information in, build context, summarize it, create a book section from it. But by doing that, we were able to do ebooks of 50 to 100 pages with real depth. And that's what you've got to do. You've got to, ChatGPT is very good at producing very good quality content if it has the subject information to draw from. And it's much better, I find, to specifically pull information in to draw than to rely on the language model itself. It will produce something, and often it will be accurate. But if it's trying to produce too much, it's likely to be quite plain, quite vanilla. It's not really going to have much insight, and it could be inaccurate. So put some work in to pull in the source data. Does that answer the question, Marcy?
Yeah, but practically, do you put all your questions together at once, or do you type out like one question, let it answer it? I know you
Yeah.
keep in the
If you're doing it,
left-hand side, you
if you're doing it
stay,
manually, if
right,
you're doing it manually, absolutely. So I would ask for one bit of information, pull that in. I would then something there might be elements missing, so I might ask for additional information, and it pulls that in. Then once I've got a document store that I'm happy for section 1, I'll get it to create section 1. Then I'd move on to section 2. And the reason I can explain this, so the way we work with any product is we'll prototype it manually before we encode it, which is so I'm just going through
right.
the steps which we did with the ebook manually to prove it worked before we encoded it. And the beauty of doing it that way is you have it's because it can hold up to 100 pages worth of information. It has all of the source information it's found, plus the information it's generated, plus the questions you've asked, plus the outline. So it has all that information. And what ChatGPT is very, very good at is bringing in a lot of context and producing relevant content based on what you ask about that content. That's where it's, I mean, people, if you like, the use case that has come to the fore because people, it was the easiest for people to use, has been content creation, and particularly marketing content. But actually, in some respects, that's not its strongest use case. Its strongest use case is verbal reasoning. It's pulling in a lot of information and getting core nuggets of information from that data, and that's what it's very, very strong at, and then producing a meaningful summary from that information. Okay, so after the detour, the next innovation I want to touch on are which were brought in actually with the latest release, are what they call MyGPTs. Now, going back to what I was saying earlier about the streams of information and the context, building those subject streams leads naturally into this innovation, MyGPTs. What they allow you to do, and this is again with ChatGPT Plus with the paid version, it allows you to pre-train your own application with data that you always want it to retain, with context you always want it to retain. So if you were using it as a marketing tool, you may create a MyGPT with all of that data that you've created. It has all your marketing literature. It has all of your the information that's been produced, the information you've added, your product sheets, and it retains it. And you can build it up over time. So you can, in the same way as you can with the stream, you can add to the GPT. You can then ask questions, you can get information, you can even link it through to the ChatGPT's browsing capability. So you can get the app to enrich its own information with information it draws from the web to enhance the context to get better results. Essentially, they're canned requests for ChatGPT. But to my mind, the real power of them, yes, it's nice to have that wizard. Yes, it's nice to have it in a packaged application. But the best thing about it, once you've done the work, it can be shared across all the people within your organization. So everyone's working from that same application, that same data set. If it's changed, the version of the application changes. So you're working on a common
Right.
knowledge pool, a common pool of information. It's a really efficient way to share context streams throughout your marketing team or your another department within your organization. The other innovation which they brought in is AI assistants. Now, assistants are to API integration what GPTs are to using ChatGPT GUI. While they lack some of the functionality available in GPT, such as browsing and image integration, they're integrated with your own code base. So they're completely flexible, allowing you to pull in from your own company's APIs or external APIs or data stores. So what assistants bring to the API field is the ability to link into your own API context and create really valuable process-driven models. And they add, with the assistants, add the concept of individual user context. So I can create one application and I don't have to worry about keeping individual context for user 1, user 2, user 3, user 4. They all come into the app, into the assistant with their own what they call threads, their own context. So I can write a single application and make it available to everybody authorized within the organization. And again, much like the GPTs, they're working off a common data set, a common process. But the real power here is they're pulling in from company APIs, maybe real-time feeds. So it can be a real improvement to your business process. Downside to it, it requires obviously a formal development cycle. It's not something with the GPTs, it's got a wizard, somebody can create it, then share that around. With wizards and API integration, it's very much a development cycle, very much a professional delivery, but much, much more powerful, much more flexible. So I think I've given you a flavor. I hope I've given you a flavor that with the latest release, OpenAI used to be two choices. You could either use the GUI or you could use the API, nothing in between. They've replaced that with a spectrum of possibilities, which you can pick and choose which tool to use for a particular application and also for a particular organization, because different organizations have a different level of development and system capability. Now, as I said, a lot of the examples I've given were in the marketing space, and that's because it's simple to explain. It's where a lot of people have started using it. But I would encourage users to think about how AI can help within their organizations. I mean, some ideas, maybe a professional service organization, they could have a system that holds customer profiles, and then when there's something in the news, when there's a change to regulations or a new innovation, it highlights which of those customers might be impacted or benefit from those new regulations. You could have a tool that draws on in-house documents, finding that key institutional knowledge that's often locked away in individual document stores and using that data to answer questions to a broader in-house audience. Or simple problem resolution, like identifying and fixing bugs in code. Possibilities are literally endless, but requires an understanding of your business combined with an understanding of the tools and techniques which are available. So that's where the training becomes so important. It's essential to educate your team, not just to the possibilities that native ChatGPT offers, but also how to maximize this benefit using more packaged and automated solutions. They also need to be made aware of the other side of the coin, the risks. Now, we've discussed how you can weave AI into the fabric of your organization and improve your collective performance significantly. What we haven't discussed is the security of that data. How can you be sure what data is secure and what isn't? If you're asking ChatGPT for a lasagna recipe, security isn't a big issue. But what if you're putting things like product descriptions, wording for a patent application, or as I discussed earlier, your customer profiles into ChatGPT? How do you ensure that data doesn't get used for training and then inadvertently published out to the rest of the world? That's where it's important to understand what OpenAI says about their own security model. And they've been quite clear. Anything you put into the native ChatGPT GUI can and will be used for training purposes and improving the model. That means anything you type or paste into ChatGPT's window is open to use. The way I think about it is anything you don't want to appear in the newspaper the next day shouldn't be going into ChatGPT. API data, that's data fed into the OpenAI models through the API, they've stated will never be used for training purposes. The inputs and outputs from API integration are considered your proprietary data and not available to OpenAI. And you actually have the capability to remove that data completely from the system at any time you choose. This is a critical distinction. Anything that holds confidential information, personal details, customer information should never go near the standard GUI interface. It should always be handled using custom applications linking through the API, even if that custom application is using an AI assistant with threads that emulates what ChatGPT's GUI does. The difference is it will look the same, but the data will be secure. As you integrate AI into your business workflow, This distinction becomes critical, and not just for your senior team, but everyone that is using AI to enhance their performance. The fact is, currently your employees are using ChatGPT to enhance their productivity. They're using it whether you know about it or not. They're often doing it without the knowledge of their managers and senior team leaders. And worst of all, they're almost certainly not considering the security implications of the data they feed into the system. With recent changes, it's no longer just one-page documents which were limited in scope. It's possible to feed large document sets into ChatGPT for summarization or explanation. While these documents may be benign, they could also hold large amounts of confidential information. It's critical for organizations to stay ahead of the curve and prevent accidental release of confidential information. By proactively engaging with your workforce and bringing AI into the business processes in a controlled manner, you can ensure your team understand the implications of the data they use. They can be shown how to reap the rewards of AI without jeopardizing company IP in the process. So I'm going to wrap it up there. I hope it was useful, and I hope the doom and gloom about security hasn't dampened your enthusiasm for the AI space and how it can benefit organizations. If managed correctly, there's a great potential and huge benefits to be gained. So thank you. I'm going to hand it over to any questions now.
Marcy, Gavin, Austin, thank you very much. That was very useful and extremely concise intro and education overview for us. Really appreciate that. I'm going to fire off a quick one from my side. Between you've got the native free, they've got the freebie product, and you've got the £20 product. £20 product, assuming you pay for it, does that, whether you use the GUI or the API, does that allow you to take out your content and delete it if you put confidential information in? Then does that protect you in that case?
So using, if we go through the spectrum, using the GUI, no. Using the GUI, that information can still be used. Using my GPTs, it's a user selection. So you can set the settings to keep the confidential information, or you can leave them open. But it is open to being set incorrectly. So it's API will never be used, and assistance will never be used because it uses the API. So that's the spectrum of security that you have with the OpenAI products, paid or not. You know, even the paid GUI, that information can be used for training purposes.
Oh, I see. So even if you pay for it, you still got to go into the setting and click it to get off the sharing. Yeah.
And for large organizations, there's a level above, which is enterprise, where it can be set up for larger organizations where they actually can, if they, we haven't touched on this because it's more technical implementation, but there's fine tuning that you can do to the actual model itself and embeddings, and they have full control on the data which is used in their for their implementations. So you can effectively ring fence your and your customers' clients if you're an enterprise customer.
Perfect. I think that's kind of where a lot of if you're going to put confidential information there, you want to be able to control that confidential information. So it's got to be, you've got to set the permissions, got to pay for the version you want. And
absolutely, and I would recommend using APIs because it's for really confidential information. I'm talking because you want to be sure that it's not accidentally released because of an employee doesn't do it quite right, or elements of that. You really do want it to be secured, and so you would replicate some of that functionality in an API. Now the downside to that, as I can make this slide deck available if it's useful. As it said, as one of the cons on the API, you wouldn't want to use it for for bulk general purpose use of non-confidential information because you're charged for each API request. So you would want to look at the process, and it's a balance between number of people using it, number of API calls, and whether it's confidential or personal information. So there's that triangle which you need to weigh up all of your data sets and determine where they fit in that hierarchy.
Thank you. That's very, very helpful. Over to the group, really. If there's any questions, I'll go on mute. Thank you.
I got one very random question. So I've got a cranky relative. Said cranky relative likes doing butterfly identification. He went to chatbot GPT. He
Yeah.
asked it what a butterfly was. It came back. It was all wrong. He went, bugger this. It's all nonsense, and walked out. And that was his short but sweet interaction with chatbot GPT before he put it in the bin and went back to old books he's got. I think from 1910 he likes those ones. That probably shows you a lot of where the mindset's at.
Yeah.
If he were
Um,
going to do this properly, presumably he would first of all need to train it on a whole lot of databases involving different butterflies and the like. Now, trying to get a bit more serious in terms of what we do on the legal side, we'll have like legal databases and the like. But once you've bothered, bluntly, to train it up on a particular group of data, can you save that within chatbot GPT? Because the problem, I think, as lawyers, because each of us have our own esoteric area of law, if you see what I mean. You train it up in that thing. If you tell me you're going to have to train it again from scratch, I'm going to want to jump from a high building rather than use chatbot GPT, if you see what I mean. So is there a
no,
way of sort of
absolutely.
shortcutting that process?
Yeah. So this there's two parts to that question. If it's the data set, I mean this is very subjective, but if it can be represented in about 100 pages of text, then you would build up either a GPT, or if it's secure data, an AI stream, and you would build up context. You would have embedded context that is stored, is held. You can add to it, and it's not lost. And you can reuse it every time, and you can add to it, and you can draw upon it. If you're talking about a broader corpus of data, and it might be a larger company information store, then what you're actually going to do is have a multi-tiered approach, where you summarize information in different sections, and the system will pull the information from these various pools as available. So again, you still wouldn't you wouldn't lose them, but there's a bit more to the development side. There you are talking about much more a developed application, because it will need to categorize the information and pull on the correct category of information to draw it in to answer the response. I mean, a good example is what we do with the news information that we pull in. It's the way it works. So without too technical, we're doing thousands of public news feeds, and it's ripping out the facts. So it's taking individual facts of information. It's then cross-referencing them to pull it to make sure that there's confirmation, and then it's categorizing them into clusters of similar data. That's what you would be doing with the knowledge. And then what we do is we look at a company, a brand, or what they're looking to appeal to, and we match against the various data clusters, and we pull that information to then create a summary and then move on to an article. What again, using the analogy of a corporate database, similar. You've got a request type which is about employment law, and in the UK, it will pull the clusters of information relevant to that, and then it will present a summary to allow you to interrogate and drill down into it. Again, it's stored information that can be added to over time. So a lot depends on the scale of what you're trying to produce, and whether that information is confidential or not. But yes, in every stage of the process, there is a mechanism to store that information, so you don't have to redo it.
And just because I think, just thinking on the services you guys provide, because what we are getting at the moment is, and again, different to call out different things, but we're getting a lot of at the moment is we will get businesses which want to promote their services. Now, the reason they're walking into us at the moment is there are new frameworks out which say what you can say what you can't say, and all the rest of it, and they're fairly checklist in nature, if you see what I mean. So.
Yep.
Now, again, the way the system works, they have to be approved by an individual. We can't eliminate the human being, if you see what I mean. However, I can see value in terms of because we've got like small startups with no marketing team, if you see what I mean, who are bodging it, for better putting it. So they could use you guys to create the initial deck, the way you do it would probably start by doing what I call a rough check against the checklist box of what the FCA do not like. And then because the way the FCA works, we can't eliminate it anyway. We'd have to go to someone who's FCA authorized to sign off. They would check it against what you guys have done and go forwards. But I think the cost saving would be in terms of, I mean, absolutely blunt, these guys obviously don't often down the Scooby of what they're doing on a day-to-day basis when it comes to this kind of thing. So at least like a semi-talented person, if I don't mind calling it a person, has done the first shot, if you see what I mean, in terms of getting all right. And then some of actual skill can then review it, check it, and all the rest of it before it fires out might be better from them than bluntly, like the CFO rocking up, having a go, and then finding out, and we all want to go cry somewhere in a corner because then we feel better. Is that
The analogy which we've worked on for actually a tax accounting firm, for his clients, he produced a front end which was they put in their specifics of their requirement. It pulled that information in. It applied current regulations and gave them an overview of how it should be presented, how it be reflected, and what they need to be reporting. And then two things. Firstly, it reported back to their customer with clear disclaimer that this is generated by AI. It's a first pass. You need to talk, if you decide to go ahead, you need to talk to us or a professional advisor to ensure it's correct. But also it provided the information to the accountant so that he knows the contact details and what they've asked. So actually he's pre-warned about, okay, this customer's interested in this area. So he can actually be on the front foot when he talks to that customer and knows the what the customers what area the customer's thinking about. So, and that's where it can add real value to professional services. It's not just the information it gives to the customer, which has to be, as I say, heavily disclaimed that it's not in your case legal advice. It's just an indication. Speak to a professional advisor, but it tells you what the key aspects of what they're trying to achieve. Does that reflect? Have I understood what you're talking about correctly?
Well, I'm moving the game along slightly. So what we've got at the moment is we have, we have a marketing team within the law firm, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
They may be interested in you separately, if you see what I mean. Marketing will tend to just do stuff, for want of a better way of putting it. The sort of stuff that I write, bluntly, I tend to just write because it's quicker and easier because bluntly I've memorized it by now, if you see what I mean. So I won't look it up, I'll just write, if you see what I mean. I'm thinking about playing you in a slightly different context, which is what we get is we get a lot of startup clients in different ways, shapes, and form. Every startup client needs some form of social media feed, marketing buzz, call it what you will.
Absolutely.
A lot of them do not. I mean, I know one or two people who are kind of like professional marketeer type people, but bluntly, that's quite expensive to hire a dedicated individual for a company at this point. And then you get the sort of two types, what I call the low risk type, which are those who are selling a product like AI or something like that. And that is quite low risk because it's not regulated. So that's an easy win if you see what I mean. They usually guys that go forwards. And then we get the other lot, they're the higher risk because they want to sell an investment product. It's highly regulated. The ability to smash something is relatively easy. And they're the ones which by law, they have to have someone with the right license sign it off, if you see what I mean. So again, you
Absolutely.
can be useful in the first cut, but one is they ought to do it. The other one, they've got to do it in terms of getting a human being sign off. And where I've got at the moment is I'll have like, so I've got some people who talk to me because the guy who knows the guy, as I call it, if you see what I mean. So there's like Web3 developers who are like, oh well, I know the guys at that particular news agent or him or whatever, and the guy who knows the guy, and that's what they're selling, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
not awesome at the actual creation. I suppose bloody awful at the content creation, some of them, if you see what I mean. But that's why I think you guys have a different. So you're not telling me you know everybody, if you see what I mean. You're telling me you can generate pulp. I don't mean in a negative way to it, but you can generate the noise and the pulp these things need in a way where someone's got to do the first draft, if you see what I mean. And bluntly, you guys as good as anyone for doing the first draft, so you become the first drafters on lots of it. Is how I'm seeing it at the moment.
So what you've kind of described is the Creative Guru product that we're just launching. What it does, it creates buzz. It generates articles, and you target a demographic, and you target the pain point of that demographic. So you're not looking at your company, you're looking at their customers and what they want to read about. It's generating a lot of content, and it's non-specific. It's very general information. And what it does is it will broadcast across social media channels. So it has its own. It's a news portal with its own Facebook, its own Twitter feed, its own X feed, its own LinkedIn, and it will generate buzz. And it will any comments people make, it will engage with, and it will respond. So it checks, is it scammy, is it spammy, is it self-promotional? If it passes those and it's a genuine comment, it will reply. It will take its own article plus the comments, and it will reply back to that article. And the whole purpose is to generate a bit of buzz in this portal, which feeds those customers to the customer. The other thing it does is exactly what you're talking about. They might they might take some of that content and think, actually, this is really good. I can merge this with my business profile using the technique which we talked about, where there's an announcement by the FCA or an announcement by the Bank of England, and it's really relevant to one of the services we offer. What the service can do, you can combine the two. It will draft a version of the article which brings their company into the mix, which could then be, in a normal process, sent to their website blog automatically, or in the process that you're talking about, sent to the advisor to review it, think, yeah, you can't quite say that, modify it, now I'm happy, and release it to the site or the post, or draft it as a tweet, or draft it as an email, or whatever, however they want to use it. And the whole point is to take that content, slice and dice it, and use it in different ways, both within the news portal, or within the customer's own site, and in the scenario you're talking about, after it's been through professional approval and sign off.
I mean, if you're, so I've got a podcast which is seen by a lot of consumers. I mean, if you like, guys, let's be on it talking about this, because the issue I've been faced with in terms of this is I get the two types, if you see what I mean. I get those who think it's basically, I don't know, Terminator, Rise of the Machines, it's all going to be awful, it's all going to be wrong, we're
Yeah.
all doomed. And I get this sort of evangelical brigade, which is my entire life is sorted. I just put in take my life over to chatbot GPT, click a button, it's gone. So getting sort of sensible how you actually use it approach, I think, would be quite useful for my client base to be aware of, because the reason I've walked from it, to completely blunt, is I've seen the two sides. I've gone both these sides completely cream crackers. I can't figure out how to use it, if you see what I mean. I'm not going to let it give the definitive say, and I don't believe it's quite as Terminatorish as they all like to pretend, if you see what I mean. So that, if you're up for it, I'd love to have you on the podcast just talking about this a bit, because I just think that will hopefully give, because I see a real need for this among, I'm going to be blunt, some of my clients are very intellectual, but terrible at like the social media style, creating words they hate. They just want to be in a small dark room, do a bit of coding, create a thing, and everything else they hate. One of them basically had a female head of marketing whose first job was to make sure he got dressed in the morning, because this was quite a shocker to him. He announced he'd been abused and all the rest of us, and the rest were just relieved he was wearing clothes. So, I mean, some of these guys don't always have the most, should we say, grown-up approach to things like social media. And that's why I think something like what you guys are talking about would be quite useful to them, because they're aware they can pass off, if you see what I mean, a little bit onto a machine, which will help them do the running.
It's interesting. I'd love, firstly, I'd love to be on the podcast. I think that'd be great. And the second thing is, it's funny. It's a use case that we hadn't considered, but it's an obvious one, where you have this news portal which is non-specific, and then some of the content you pass off through an advisor to sign off on it. It's actually a really interesting idea. So useful for us as well, being here.
We'll set that up. I'll drop an email. Dan, you'll probably have to the magic, if you see what I mean. We will set this up, if you see what I mean. Dan, you'll probably have to help me.
We'll make that happen. Yes, no problem.
Perfect. That's excellent.
Is there any more questions from the team? We can, in that case, thank you. Thanks for the
Thank you
this
so
morning.
much for the time this morning. It was really interesting. So speak to you soon.
Thank you, team.
Thanks,
Appreciate that.
guys.
Take care.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.